Hi everybody and welcome. This is going to be the first video of a series that I'm making about basic concepts of music theory, specifically relating to singing and singing in a choir. So these are going to be like basic how-to or breakdowns of reading sheet music and applying the theory that we learned, so we know kind of how to read the sheet music, because really it's a bunch of instructions compiled together and we have to be able to understand the instructions and to understand the language that they're written in so that we can respond. This first video is going to be about rhythm and how rhythm or timing is notated in sheet music and how we can read it. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Alright, hopefully you guys can all see my screen. So we're going to start looking at these series of notes. Each of these notes are basically a measurement. So if we look at the first one, it's called a semi-brief. What that means is it's 4 counts long. So if you see this note, this type of note, it doesn't have a stem or a tail, that's how you tell it apart, and it's not coloured in the middle, you would count for 4. So this is actually the longest one we have. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4. Next is a minim, and it is half, is 2. You can see it's the same, it's got a white interior, it's not coloured in, but it's got a tail or a stem pointing up. It doesn't matter if it's up or down, it's just got a stem. And that means we would hold it for 2 counts. 1, 2. Now next we have the crotchet. This one is coloured in and it's got a stem. This is 1. This is the basic measurement that we use. It's kind of like the standard unit that we use. So this is always 1, 2, 3, 4. So every time, especially if there's 4 beats in a bar, we would hit or clap every time. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is kind of the basic measurement that we always use. And then we have quaver, which is a half. So for a crotchet, we would say 1, 2, 3, 4. For the quaver, we say 1, 2, 3, 4. A semi-quaver is a quarter. We won't even look at that yet. These are the 4 basic ones that you need to know. From here we can see they've got a hierarchy. Basically they've put it in a pyramid. So the semi-brief is 4, remember. Minim is worth 2, crotchet is worth 1, quaver is worth half. Now they've put this in a bit of a pyramid to show kind of, I guess, the maths behind it. So for every semi-brief, 2 minims would fit into a semi-brief because 2 plus 2 equals to 4. Whereas for each minim, there are 2 crotchets. For each crotchet, there are 2 quavers. So in 4 crotchets, there would be 8 quavers. In a semi-brief, there would be 8 quavers. That kind of makes sense. They've kind of used this pyramid to show that. There's one more note that I want to also show you. It's a minim with a dot next to it, and it's quite literally called a dotted minim, and that simply equals to 3. So that's the one that's in between a semi-brief and minim. So you would hold it for 1, 2, 3. So let's have a look at how this kind of works together. We'll just look at the first bar here. So the bar, these lines, bar lines. So the first bar is just before the first line. And if we remember what these are all crotchets. So this is 1 beat each. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you look at the beginning, this is quite important. We see 4, 4 written down. That tells us, this usually sets at the beginning of a piece, and it tells us there's going to be 4 beats in a bar. So we have to basically, all of them in total have to add up to 4. So in the first bar, we're all good because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and that does add up. Now let's look at the next bar. So remember, we can only have 4 beats in a bar, and what are these both worth? These are both worth 2. So 2 and 2 is equal to 4. So we're still good. There are still 4 beats in a bar, but there's 2 minimums. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Because each minimum, we hold it for 2 beats each. So I hope that makes sense. That in a bar, there's always going to be 4 beats if it's in 4/4 time. And then the way that the beats are split up depends on the rhythm, right? So let's look at the next one. This is a pretty easy one. There's still 4 beats in a bar, 2, 3, 4. But because this semi-brief is worth 4 beats, we just play 1, 2, 3, 4. That should be hopefully pretty straightforward. Now, if we look at the last bar here, these are all quavers. So if you remember, quaver equals to a half. So for each crotchet, there's going to be 2 quavers. So this sounds like 1, 2, 3, 4. A trick to help us count the quavers is actually, so we already have the 4 beats as normal. But the thing is that each of these quavers comes between the beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And sometimes it can be problematic if it's not just straight quavers. If you're not sure which beat the quaver falls on, it helps us to count with and. So say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So each kind of beat, including the beats between the beats, is accounted for. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So let's have a look at an example. This song, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I'm sure we all know how this song goes. But let's just look at the rhythm, how it's notated. So we're just going to look at the top line here. We see 4/4 time. So that tells us there's going to be 4 beats for each bar. So just have a look at the whole line and try to kind of tap it out or clap it out yourself. And then we can do it together. So you'll notice all of these are crotchets, which is just 1 beat each. Except for here and here we have a minimum. So in those ones, we'll hold it for 2. So I'm going to count to 4 and then we'll start. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So hopefully you remember to hold these minimums as 2 beats each. So these cover the beats 3 and 4. So we don't repeat the 4th one as we did in these bars. I hope that makes sense. So moving on, usually when we sing, we are not constantly singing. There are rests, or there are places where we take a break. There are places where we breathe. And these places are notated through the use of rests. So it's pretty self-explanatory. If you see a rest, that means you will rest in that place instead of singing, or in our case, clapping now, because we are just clapping out the rhythm. And there is a rest that is equivalent to each of the note values. So we can see for the semi-brief, which is the 4, we have a semi-brief rest. So that means a rest for 4 beats. And that just looks like an upside down hat or square, because it's sitting underneath the line. That tells us when we see it that for 4 beats we take a rest. Now the next one is the minimum, or 2. And it sits on top. It's like a top hat. And it tells us to take a rest for 2. Crotchet is 1. And this crotchet rest, which is like a squiggly line, tells us to take a break for 1 beat. And last of all, quaver, which we know is a half. It looks like this, a dot there. That will tell us to take a break worth a quaver time, basically. So I'm going to try out this exercise with you guys now. I'm going to keep the rests in the photo so that you can still refer back to it if you need help. So we're going to say this is 4/4 time. And again, just looking at the first bar, 1 bar at a time. So we can see, obviously, we're still going to have 4 beats in a bar. That doesn't change. 1, 2, 3, 4. But what does change is where we are singing, or where we clap. So 1, rest, 2, sorry, 1, rest, 3, rest. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, but on 2 and 4 we rest. So if we tap that out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So for the 2 and 4, our hands should be apart or our hands lifted up, so we show that we're resting. Now normally for choir or singing, when there is a rest, especially before we come in, that indicates that's the place to breathe. So that's like a way to apply it to choir. If we look at the second bar this time, it's very similar. It's still got crotchets and crotchet rests, but in different positions. So please have a go, and please actually do clap this out by yourself. You're only going to get out what you put in, so just pause the video and have a try, and then you'll see if you're right. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, rest, rest, 1. So I hope that's pretty straightforward. If we look at the next bar now, we have the minim, which is 2, remember, and a minim rest, which is 2. So for the first 2, we're resting. For the second 2, we are playing. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, rest, 3, 4. That's pretty straightforward again. So try the next bar on your own. And let's give it a go together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, rest, 4. Okay. Oops. So the rest comes on the third beat. Now, if you had trouble with any of those, please go back and try them again. Don't try to just keep advancing, because if you don't have that basic fundamental understanding, then you kind of won't be able to build upon it. So that is really like the fundamental concepts that we need to know. The next 2 bars are a bit more tricky, a bit more complicated. So let's look just at the next bar for now, because they involve quaver and quaver rest. So that always makes it harder. Remember the trick that I said, rather than just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And so we can also count for the offbeats. So it's going to be a bit tricky, but give this one a go. Take your time, clap it out. Hopefully you've had a go by now, and I'm going to show you the answer. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So let's have a look. Why is it like that? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so the ending is just 2 crotchets. It comes on 3 and 4. That's pretty simple. It just comes on the normal beats. But the first half of the bar is a bit trickier than that. That's because instead of, usually we're used to going 1, 2, 3, 4, but this time 2 is actually a rest, and you play on the and instead, and a lot of people forget to come in on the and. So if we have a go 1 and rest and 3 and 4 and, hopefully that makes sense why it's like that. So keep practicing until you're able to actually get it. And then if you've managed to get that one down, let's look at the last one. Do it on your own first, and then come back when you've done it. Let's have a go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So again, we come in on the and at the very end, which is the tricky bit, and we rest on 4. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that's the tricky bit too, because you come on the off beat, you kind of come when you're not expecting to come. So let's try it again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right, let's have a look at an example from a song again. We'll just look at the top line. 3, 4 times. So the thing that's a bit important to say, we can have 4, 4 time, which means 4 beats in a bar. But there's other time signatures which are 3, 4 time, which tells us there's only 3 beats in a bar. So it shouldn't add up to anything more than 3. So this is actually counted like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and the other tricky thing about this song is that the first bar already breaks the rule. There are not 3 beats in the first bar, there's only 1. And hymns often do this actually, where they break up the first and the last bar. So often the last bar only has 2 and the first bar has 1. So together they add up to 3, but they are split in half, I guess. So this one actually starts on 3 because it's the last beat of the bar before we go to the next bar, so it's 3. So I'll let you try count it out. Remember there's the minims, remember there's the quavers. Give it a go, clap it, and when you're done, come back. So let's try out together. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So let's try and write the counts. So I hope that makes a bit of sense now that we've written it down. That's the 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'll actually tell you that this is Amazing Grace, the hymn. So once you kind of realize, oh, I know this song, it becomes a lot easier. But I didn't want to tell you from the beginning because I wanted you to figure out the rhythm, I guess, without knowing. Let's look at another example, which is another song that we do in the choir, Jerusalem. So this writing is very messy. That doesn't look like a U at all. Jerusalem. And I'm going to write in, you can't see, but it is 4/4 time. And be mindful because the very first beat of this bar is a rest. That's a crotchet rest, remember that's worth 1 rest. And also be very careful because the last quaver comes on the end, not on the 4. So please take your time, do it nice and slow, try clapping it out. Honestly, try a few times, try really hard, and then when you think you've got it, come and watch this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 4, and. So how did that go? Let's see why was it kind of like that. So the 1 is on the rest, obviously. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So it's always tricky when the quaver comes on an end. So John saw a city that could not be hid, because it kind of comes on the offbeat. So I hope that makes sense of why it happened like that. The last thing that we're going to learn is a dotted note. So when you see this, when you see the crotchet and it's got the dot next to it, I'll kind of explain how that will sound like. So you can see the second half of this bar just has 2 crotchets, and we know that's the straight rhythm, just like 1, 2, 3, 4. But the first half, we can think of it like, oops, sorry, I'm trying to just draw it on. This is a crotchet and this is a crotchet. It's just hard to color in with this, sorry. We can think of it like the first crotchet stole a beat from the other one, and so that gained a dot there next to it because it stole. It's not letting me draw. Sorry, give me a second. Yeah, so you can see I stole a beat and turned this one into a quaver instead. So the quaver comes on the end instead of normal. It's 1 and 2 and. The first one stole the 2. So instead of sounding 1, 2, 3, 4, it sounds like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So it kind of stole it off, if that kind of makes sense. So the first one becomes a fraction longer and the second one becomes a fraction shorter instead of being the normal, just straight time. An example where this happens is in our song we've also done in rehearsals, the first Noel. So just look at the top line. This is 3/4 time, and we can see it starts with the rest, and we only come in on the third beat, 3 and 1. So we can see this one here is the one that is the dotted crotchet, and instead of saying the first Noel, it's saying first Noel. It kind of takes a bit. So let's try clap it out. Not just because you know the song the first Noel, but try actually follow the rhythm. And now we'll go through it together. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1 2 3. And we'll stop there. This is a good song because it's got a range of different patterns. We can see 1 and 2 have been taken by the first one, and the next note only comes in on and instead. Let's look at our last example for this video, which is another song that we're doing in choir. I will follow thee. So this is 3/4 timing once again, and everyone can follow their respective part, by the way. So basses will be down here in the bottom, tenors here, sopranos on top, and altos there, because the rhythm is notated the same for everyone. We're not looking at the notes, we're just looking at the rhythm in this video. So again, it's 3 and 1. So as in, we start on 3 and come to 1. So give it a go by yourself. Now that we're back, let's try it together. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1 and 2 and 3. I might have done it a bit fast, but I hope that makes sense to you guys. This is a really good example here. These two bars are really good juxtaposition, or they're good to compare with one another. So the first bar here, that's bar 1, that's bar 2, for the guys as well, so you can see. The first bar is like the straight rhythm, where it's just, sorry, it's 1 and 2 and 3. And what I'm trying to say is like the crotchets at the beginning, they're just like, they go like normal. Whereas the second one has the dotted crotchet, where it's like a bit off. So 1 and 2 and 3. So how they sound together is 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. So okay, I hope you can kind of really see the difference now and how the dotted crotchet impacts. So that was the last example. I really hope that this made sense to you guys. Please go practice this, even just like open like your hymn book or a random book and practice rhythms, not too hard ones, but practice clapping them out and you will become a pro soon. But yeah, thanks for watching and I hope that you learnt something.